Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Nothing But Good by Kess Mckinley. Narrated by Kirt Graves. Chapter 1. The scene could have been on a postcard in one of the many souvenir shops in Faneuil Hall. Multi-million-dollar condos towered skyward, boasting views that stretched miles into Boston Harbor, from the distinctive twin hills of nearby Spectacle Island to rocky Hangman Island in the distance. Periodically, the beam of the far-off Graves light swept in a flash across the water. Near the harbor center, two luxury yachts, each larger than Special Agent Jefferson Haines's one-bedroom apartment, were anchored side by side. One sported an infinity pool spanning the top level. The other had enough space on the deck to store a second, smaller boat on board for day trips. Dozens of sailboats rested about 20 yards off the shoreline, their masts standing dense as a forest with limp sails instead of leaves. Overhead, an enormous archway bridged the gap between two wings of a boutique hotel, creating the grand open plaza where Jefferson stood. Jefferson had been told that the pricey restaurants lining the ground level provided the perfect atmosphere in which to celebrate life's milestones, like anniversaries and career-making promotions. But he wouldn't know, because he'd never had the occasion to go before now. It wasn't exactly the time to try the scallops at the Rose Wharf Grill. Early on a Tuesday morning, so much of the city still lay sleeping that Jefferson could hear the sound of every wave lapping against the harbor walk where he stood. A steady breeze gave the already frigid air a bite. He hunched his shoulders as he walked closer to the barrier at the ocean's edge, the large concrete blocks connected by thick wrought iron links, tugging his bureau windbreaker closer to his chest. The official start of spring had come and gone, but in Boston the seasons rarely followed the calendar. Despite the rays of light glinting off droplets of morning dew on the cobblestones at his feet, warm weather wouldn't truly arrive until May. A little over a month prior, this part of the harbor froze solid, and the pathway perpetually needed to be cleared of snow. Contrasted against so much stately beauty, the body lying face down, legs sprawled on one of the docks, head and shoulders submerged in water, looked especially lurid. Jefferson guessed the deceased might have been a man in his late 20s or early 30s, around his own age. The victim appeared to be 5'8" or 5'9", Caucasian with red hair. Strands of copper drifted aimlessly back and forth in the waves. It was hard to be sure about the victim's clothes at this distance, but Jefferson thought the gold bands shining brightly against the murky harbor water could be from a Bruins jersey. A crime scene like this rarely became the business of the FBI. In a city with a large student population like Boston, young men drowned at higher rates than in the average American town. They got drunk and accidentally fell in bodies of water. They went on late-night runs and slipped off cobblestone pathways. They intentionally took their own lives by jumping off bridges. Normally, the Boston Police Department would pursue an investigation like this on their own. But this hadn't been an accident. Although Jefferson couldn't see any signs of trauma from his vantage point, the signature painted on the wall behind the corpse told him that this had been a murder. A crude black circle of paint several feet in diameter filled in with jagged yellow swaths of paint. Inside that, two thick black slashes for eyes and a single curled line for the mouth. Simple, yet effective. The 20 to 30 additional minutes the killer had taken to leave this calling card, putting them at heightened risk of being discovered, revealed a lot about their personality. This killer did not feel remorse for their actions. They felt smug enough about what they'd done to effectively scream it for the world to hear. This killer was an even shittier person than the typical asshole Jefferson investigated. Out on the water, a double-crested cormorant emerged briefly for air, craning its head to look curiously in Jefferson's direction, then dove deeply again. "Special Agent Haines," Someone called across the small crowd of agents, detectives, and officers gathered in clusters along the harbor walk. Jefferson turned, relaxing at the sight of the tall woman striding toward him, her black hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. "Special Agent Pelly," he said, matching the level of formality she'd adopted for the circumstance. Side by side, they made an imposing pair. She stood only a few inches shorter than Jefferson's own 6'4" frame, with equally broad shoulders. Her dark skin complemented his own New England winter pallor. Caroline had been a Division I college swimmer at the University of Maryland. In the years since, she hadn't let her physical fitness slide. Every bit of her body was sculpted, solid muscle, from her calves to her sinewy biceps. Once, a suspect told her she belonged on the cover of Sports Illustrated. It had been inappropriate under the circumstances, and she'd probably cuffed him harder than she'd needed to, but Jefferson objectively found it hard to argue with the idiot. "What are you wearing?" she asked, once she'd gotten closer. She'd already dressed for a day at the office, in navy slacks and a fitted white dress shirt with her heavy FBI jacket zipped over top. "You still think you'll get in a workout today?" Jefferson huffed. I wish. The call alerting him about the discovery of the body had come 15 minutes before they usually met up to head to a sports club a block from their apartment each morning. Pressed for time, he'd only managed to grab his light jacket and clip his 9mm Glock Luger pistol into a holster at his hip, not pull on sweatpants over his workout shorts. "I brought you this," he said, offering the still steaming styrofoam Dunkin' Donuts cup in his left hand. She took a sip with a pleased hum. Thanks." "Learned anything?" he asked. Caroline brushed past him, stepping to the edge and looking down at the victim with a faint grimace. "An early morning jogger happened to look down toward the water when she stopped to tie a shoe and caught sight of the display," she explained. "After the 911 call was routed to them, BPD notified a wide range of agencies, including the Massachusetts State Police, the Coast Guard, and the FBI due to the location of the body and its unique staging." For the moment, an invisible fence surrounded the crime scene. None of the hovering first responders dared to approach it until jurisdiction was sorted out. "The Vic's name is Henry O'Brien," she continued. 27. Local boy. Born and raised in South Boston. He was at the Bruins game last night with his friends. Reportedly, they all walked out together, but they lost him in the crowd outside the garden. They figured he'd catch a different train and meet them back at their apartment. Apparently, Jefferson had been right about Henry wearing a Bruins jersey. He didn't need to guess if Henry had ever made it home, either. Which he never did. "No?" Caroline's eyes flicked back to the water. "We're a half-mile from the garden," Jefferson said. "So either Henry got lost or someone moved him here." "Had he been drinking?" Jefferson asked. "It was a Bruins game," Caroline said pointedly. So Henry had had more than a few beers. Not that that made it his fault some sicko had decided to kill him. To abduct someone in a sea of 20,000 people, not to mention everyone else out at the bars on Causeway Street, you needed your prey to go relatively willingly, or at least be unlikely to cause a fuss. "What do you think of that?" Jefferson asked, gesturing at the shock of black and yellow on the seawall. Parts of the graffiti tag were still trailing droplets of paint. It was fresh, only hours old. "It means the case is ours," she said, meaning FBI business. Jefferson shaded his eyes with one hand, looking toward the distant horizon. Boats were starting to move through the channel in earnest now. Fishermen headed back to the seaport with their morning catches, and ferries shuttling commuters to the city center. People were waking up and going about their day, oblivious to the fact that a monster lived among them. Voice tight, he said, "It's about time." By now they were all familiar with the methods of the rumored Smiley Face Killer. Over the last 10 years, the bodies of over a dozen men had been discovered along the Charles River and Boston Harbor in suspicious drowning cases. Although the victims had all been male and between the ages of 20 and 35, they had little else in common. They had otherwise varied in race, socioeconomic status, and even sexuality. In several of the cases, a smiley face icon of some kind appeared within 50 feet of the scene. In many of the cases where the death was ruled suicide, the family and friends of the victim insisted that the victim had no history of mental illness and no warning signs of suicidal thoughts. In multiple cases determined to be accidental drowning, toxicology screens found no alcohol in the victim's bloodstream at the time of death. Gradually, as the victim's stories spread, a cult internet theory developed that a serial killer was hunting down young men in Boston and luring them to their deaths in nearby water bodies. Over time, the theory grew to a powerful urban legend. Every time a young man went missing, whether or not they were found alive, the whispers started. The Smiley Face Killer is back. Some variations of the myth depicted the Smiley Face Killer as a group of murderers acting together. Yet for years, these similar cases had continued to be claimed by the Boston Police Department instead of being directed to the FBI. Jefferson thought that could partially be explained by the misguided public emphasis on the smiley face as a potential signature. Until today, the smiley faces recorded were small, farther from the body, and more fragile, drawn in the sand or written in pen, easily washed away. Because the BPD didn't consistently find the signature, they could dismiss the common sign as unrelated to their investigations. Maybe smiley faces had been intentionally left near the bodies all along, or maybe the killer had only now adopted the calling card to build on his growing public mystique. The more significant component to the cases, Jefferson believed, was the cause of death. Every single victim had drowned. From what little he could remember of the Intro to Literature course he'd mostly slept through in college, death by drowning was a deeply symbolic act. Studying that further could give them some insight into their killer's motivations. Is Deputy Director Straight here yet? Their boss had been advocating for the FBI to take the lead on the Smiley Face murders for years. Undoubtedly, Straight would be eager to hit the ground running with the investigation now. Better to be proactive and find him than to make him have to chase them down. "He's over there," Caroline said, pointing behind Jefferson. "I wanted to brief you before we spoke with him." Jefferson turned, immediately spotting the deputy director in conversation with a state police officer. Straight looked even more stern than usual, his mouth set in a flat line to match his particularly square jaw. "Thanks, C," he said with feeling. They were about 10 feet away when Straight glanced up and noticed their approach, excusing himself to take several steps closer to them. "Special Agent Pelly, Special Agent Haines," he greeted. He gave Jefferson Shorts a noticeable, disapproving once-over. His eyes said, "This isn't the first time you've been underdressed at a crime scene." Jefferson ignored the unspoken criticism. So what if he had a hard time finding his clothes at a surprise early morning call-out? Wasn't it more important that he be quick to arrive to the scene? They found a quieter stretch of iron railing to huddle. Deputy Director Straight held up a finger to his lips while he studied the body's staging. After a few moments, he met Jefferson's eye. "Tell me what you think about this, then." It felt a little like a test. Jefferson intended to show he could do his job no matter what he wore. "I believe the discovery of this morning's smiley face, larger and closer to the body than with any victims before, was meant as a direct challenge to law enforcement," he said. "It's likely that our Mr. Smiley is getting restless. For too long his work has gone unnoticed, written off in the Globe as just another suicide by a depressed college student." Deputy Director Straight pulled a face at that, making it clear that he considered this a serious failure by the Boston Police Department and Boston's most respected newspaper. So, long deprived of the attention and recognition he feels he deserves, the killer will likely continue to escalate their attacks, Caroline added. They'll come more frequently, and they'll come with other signatures that are impossible to ignore. She gestured at the smiley face, still leering at them. I agree. I want you two to take point on this, Straight said. Caroline stood straighter at attention, doing a good job of hiding her surprise. Jefferson followed suit. They'd known they'd be asked to help with the investigation, but there were agents with many more years of experience in the Boston office who would reasonably have been expected to take the lead on such a significant case. Do us proud, Straight told them, eyes hard. Show the BPD exactly why they should have called us in years ago. Yes, sir, Jefferson said. His partner echoed the words. I expect regular reports, Straight told them. Then he turned to leave, making his way toward Atlantic Avenue, where he presumably hoped to catch a car back to their office. Once he'd disappeared from sight, Caroline turned to Jefferson. She looked pleased. It was a testament to their past success that the deputy director had chosen them. What's our plan? First, Jefferson asked, with a wave at his shorts. Apparently I should run home to change. She snorted a laugh. Please do. I can't look at those pasty legs all day. After checking to be sure none of their peers were looking their direction, he flipped her off. Then interviews? She asked more seriously. Yes, let's track down those friends Henry went to the game with. Chapter 2. There were many things Jefferson liked about his job. Feeling like he could make a difference in the world, putting the bad guys away, helping others, working with Caroline, the pressure to be in peak physical shape. Putting on a suit to conduct interviews of the friends and family of the recently deceased was nowhere near the top of the list. Jefferson owned exactly 3 suits, 1 navy and 2 dark gray. He'd bought them off the rack 5 years ago during a buy 2, get 1 half off sale at Joseph A. Bank. They were all the exact same size, and all 3 fit wrong in different ways. The sleeves on one ended a 1/4 inch too short, so the white cuffs of his dress shirts always showed. The pants in the ones he had on right now squeezed tight in the thighs. Whenever he sat, the fabric stretched to the point of being uncomfortable. For as long as they'd been partnered together, Caroline had been telling him to get his suits properly tailored. Jefferson kept meaning to, if only to make it easier to breathe while in interviews, but he hadn't gotten around to it yet. The witness sitting across from them was a kid. No, not a kid. Peter McDonough was 26, but he looked like a kid. Too thin, red eyes, arms wrapped around his body as if trying to hug himself, the frame of his body almost hidden by an oversized gray sweatshirt. Peter actively fought back tears at the thought that he would never see his friend again. He also clearly had a hangover. He kept wincing whenever he glanced toward the bright overhead light. Walk us through what happened that night, Jefferson said. He tried to sound approachable, sympathetic even, but the instructions came out brusquer than he meant for them to. Neither half of their partner duo was a very touchy-feely kind of person. Tell us everything you can remember. No matter how inconsequential a detail might seem, it might be important. The game ended, Peter said slowly. He closed his eyes, tipping his head back in what seemed to be an unconscious effort to remember more. We'd been down 2-1 going into the third, but the Bees had come back and won, so everyone was excited. People were yelling, throwing their drinks. We were in the nosebleeds, so it took us a while to get down through the stairwell. How many of you were there? Caroline asked. They already knew the answer to that question, but sometimes it made a difference to hear how the witness answered it. If the number changed, or a member of their group stood out more than another, that could be key to unlocking a lead. 4, Peter said. Me, Henry. His face crumpled. Our friend Beau and his girlfriend Julie. We all went to MIT together. Did you meet up with anyone else? Jefferson asked. Talk to anyone? Friends from school? Strangers? No, Peter said. We hadn't seen each other in a while, so we just wanted to hang out. Bo and Julie, I mean. Henry was... He made a broken, choked-off sound. Henry wasn't my roommate, my best friend. I saw him every day. He raised a fist to his face, scrubbing at his eyes. Hundreds of people had cried to Jefferson over the years. Moms who'd lost sons, children who'd lost parents, husbands who'd lost wives. Most of the time he didn't let it visibly affect him. It wasn't that he didn't feel for them. He did. He couldn't imagine what most of the people he interviewed went through. But if he couldn't turn his emotions off, if he always let himself be sucked in, he'd be overwhelmed by how fucked up the world could be. He would drown in other people's hopelessness and loss. Watching Peter wipe his eyes while his voice broke hit Jefferson hard. Harder than any interview in a very long time, since maybe his first year on the job. He took too long to respond. Caroline gave him a sideways, curious look, then turned her full attention back to their witness. "So you didn't speak to anyone else that night?" she asked. "Not really," Peter said. "I mean, we ordered drinks. We high-fived other people in the crowd when we scored. But no, we were just watching the game." "Okay," Jefferson said, regaining control of himself. "Then what? What happened after the game ended?" "It was really crowded," Peter said. "There were people everywhere, and everyone was in their jerseys, so everyone looked the same. We followed the crowd down the stairs and eventually ended up outside. It was freezing. We needed to take the T home, so we decided to cross Causeway Street and use the entrance there. With so many other people on the street, we couldn't get back inside North Station to get the train there." "When did you realize Henry was missing?" Jefferson asked. "A few minutes after we crossed the street. He was standing at the crosswalk with us," Peter explained. "He should have been right behind us when we got to the other side, but he wasn't. He was just gone." "That was the last place you saw him?" Caroline prompted. "At the crosswalk by the Bobby Orr statue?" Both Caroline and Jefferson lived very close to where Henry had last been seen, and knew those streets better than anywhere else in Boston. Everything Peter described, Jefferson could picture vividly in his head without needing to walk the site in person. They still would, of course. "Yeah," Peter said, with another hitch to his voice. We waited a while on the corner, thinking he'd somehow missed the light. We went back across to look for him. We tried calling him. He never picked up. Eventually we decided to catch a train and go home. We were all tired. I said I'd keep an eye out for him back at the apartment." "Did you suspect anything was wrong?" Caroline asked. "No, I thought he was just being a drunk idiot." Peter said this with a healthy amount of self-disgust. "If I'd known—" He broke off. Caroline tried a different approach. "You spent a lot of time with Henry. Had he started behaving differently lately? Disappearing for long periods of time, taking more calls, bringing new people over?" "No," Peter said, looking bewildered. "He worked a lot, so when he was home he just wanted to relax. We watched a lot of Netflix, ordered delivery. He was taking a break from dating, so he wasn't using any of the apps." "Had he pissed anyone off recently?" Jefferson asked. Peter shook his head and said, "No." Jefferson followed up on his previous question with, "Had either of you gotten any threatening messages, either online or in the mail?" "I don't think so," Peter answered. A brief silence ensued as both Jefferson and Caroline thought through any other questions they might like to ask. Peter filled the gap. "I still can't believe it's true," he said. "Why would someone kill Henry?" "We plan to figure that out," Caroline told him in her most authoritative voice, the one that declared FBI agent to the world. Henry's other friends from MIT, Bo and Julie, independently confirmed Peter's story. No, they hadn't spent much time with anyone else that night. No, there hadn't been any reason to worry when they first lost sight of Henry at the crosswalk. No, in the crowd they hadn't noticed anyone following them or getting too close. 1 minute Henry stood behind them, and the next he'd vanished.
"Fans are always assholes at the garden,"
Julie said, biting her lip and looking disappointed she couldn't be more helpful.
"But no one particularly stood out. I would have noticed if someone was paying too much attention to us."
As much as Jefferson's gut told him this was the real thing, the Smiley Face Killer striking again. The legend of their Mr. Smiley had become too widespread in Boston. If someone wanted to kill Henry and had gotten creative about it, they could have intentionally staged the crime scene to throw suspicions off themselves. A little extra effort to hold Henry's head underwater and paint the seawall would have bought the killer time while law enforcement pursued a red herring. Before Jefferson and Caroline could determine if this was the work of a serial killer, they needed to investigate whether or not anyone in Henry's life might have wanted him dead. Although Jefferson could admit to his bias in this particular instance, he believed it would be incredibly hard to fake the depths of despair he'd seen in Peter's eyes during their interview. Julie's boyfriend, Beau, had also come across as genuine in his grief. From what Jefferson could tell, Beau held the friend group together. Beau had been the one to plan the night at the Bruins game, and now seemed guilt-ridden over having done so. Julie, though, something didn't completely add up with her. Jefferson studied Julie carefully across the table under the guise of giving her a moment to collect her thoughts. She wasn't sad in the same way her friends had been. Shocked, sure, but not necessarily sad. The red rimming her bright green eyes could just as easily be attributed to the night of binge drinking their little group had embarked on as on tears. Since she didn't seem inclined to start crying any time soon, Jefferson decided to shift his tact. "I went to MIT, too," he told her conversationally.
"Yeah?"
Julie asked, tilting her head, looking hesitant to go along with the change in topic. "Best 4 years of my life," Jefferson said, giving her a quick smile. Caroline only glanced at him for a split second, but Jefferson could feel her rising curiosity. This hadn't been in the plan they'd outlined in advance of their meeting with Julie. Plus, Jefferson hardly ever got chatty like this in interviews. "Is that where you first met Henry?" Jefferson asked.
"Yes,"
Julie said.
"He took a programming class with Beau. They used to study together."
"Was that his major?" Jefferson asked. "Programming?" Henry's major, Jefferson knew, had been computer science. Julie's forehead scrunched. It looked like she was starting to get frustrated with these seemingly unrelated questions, although she tried to pass the emotion off as confusion.
"I guess. It must have been something like that. He works with computers now."
"You've known Henry a long time," Jefferson observed. "How would you describe his personality?"
"I heard the Smiley Face Killer had done this to Henry," she said abruptly. "Why are you asking me all these questions?"
How the fuck had she heard that already? Nothing had broken yet in the news, not that Jefferson knew of. Her knowledge of the crime scene only compounded Jefferson's mounting suspicion of her. Caroline, who had been leaning backwards with arms crossed over her chest while she let Jefferson take the reins in the interview, sat upright at that, placing her palms on the table.
"Because you're hiding something,"
she said, voicing Jefferson's thoughts exactly.
"I'm not,"
Julie protested. Her breath hitched, a clear giveaway that she was lying. "Where were you last night between the hours of 10 p.m. and 5 a.m.? Jefferson asked, speaking slowly and enunciating every word as he held Julie's gaze.
"With Beau, at his apartment,"
Julie answered, voice rising. "Can anyone verify that besides Beau?" Jefferson challenged. Julie's eyes went progressively wider with fear and surprise.
"No,"
she said, mouth twisting. Jefferson made sure to trade a seemingly significant look with Caroline. They'd rehearsed that look for hours one night on Jefferson's sofa, wanting to find the perfect way to make their suspects sweat. By now they had it down pat.
Wait, yes, Julie said, as a flush of relief lit her pale cheeks. The concierge can. We came in through the lobby. Beau said hello. Jefferson made a scribble of that in his notebook, wanting to be sure not to forget. Follow up with Beau concierge.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?